Last season on Dallas.
Don't you understand that I'm never going to get my son out of South Fork?
When'd you get back? About a half hour ago? Really?
How long do you think you could stop me? Oh, I'm going to get him, JR. One way or another.
For her child, she loves him.
Stay out of my affairs, Pamela. Kristen, what a pleasant surprise.
It's nice to see you too, JR.
The hell it's over.
He's gonna regret what he said to me.
She's dead. You bastard.
We pick things up right where we left off at the end of Season 4, with Cliff Barnes having discovered a dead body in the pool, and J.R. Ewing looming overhead on the balcony. When we catch up, Cliff is delivering his statement to Sheriff Fenton Washburn, played by the always fun Barry Corbin. Cliff describes it exactly as it happened. He had just come home from a late afternoon tryst with his supermodel girlfriend, saw the body in the pool, tore off his $10,000 suit to reveal his rippling pectoral muscles, and pulled her out of the water. But it was too late. Her dying words were, "My, what a handsome man you are," and also J.R. Ewing killed me. And that's exactly how it happened. J.R., of course, doesn't want any part of an investigation, and he tells Fenton as such, even going so far as to threaten him.
I gotta do my duty as an officer of the law.
It turns out the woman in the pool was Kristen Shepard, so of course J.R. is the main suspect in her death. Bobby arrives on the scene and learns about Kristen's death and Pamela's absconding with Lil John to meet up with Sue Ellen. Fenton is torn between doing his job and pissing off the Ewings, and it appears he decides to half-ass it and do both, bringing JR in for questioning, but also barely investigating. Director Irving J. Moore does a good job of making this scene feel urgent and chaotic, but the script does tend to draw out the drama to pad the runtime. The next morning, Bobby, despite being a Ewing, has not been able to find a flight to Abilene until daylight. He leaves Ray in charge, who winds up having to play Uncle Exposition for Lucy and the audience. Sheriff Washburn's questioning of JR seems to have lasted all night. Or maybe that's just how long it takes to get coffee at Braddock PD. JR explained that Kristen showed up all potted up on several ounces of sativa brownies, and must have taken a flying leap when he went to take a phone call from Lieutenant McSween. He heard a noise and went out to the balcony to find Cliff Barnes holding Kristen's head underwater, screaming, "I barely know you, but I'm gonna drown you and frame JR to get even for my alcoholic daddy. I hate JR because he's so rich and handsome. Much more so than me. Die! Die!" And JR said, "Barnes, you stop that. Do what you want to me, but leave the girl alone." But it was too late. And that's exactly how it happened. Also, not that this necessarily means anything unless the writers were aware of deception psychology and wanted to plant an Easter egg, but when Fenton asks him point blank if he pushed Kristen off the balcony, JR responds with a non-contracted denial.
Did you push Kristen Shepard off that balcony? I did not.
A red flag for lying is that liars will often avoid informal language for emphasis.
Oh, hi, Mark.
Cliff is released just in time to see the morning edition of the Dallas Press. Much like last year's J.R. Ewing shot by wife headline, Kristen is reduced to Ewing kin. Cliff calls his mom, which, good for him. It's been a rough couple of hours. Lieutenant McSween arrives at Ewing Oil to tell him that a car registered to Dusty Farlow was seen picking up the boy. JR wonders what the Farlows would want with John Ross and makes a plan to fly down to San Angelo. McSween warns JR that he'd be giving up home field advantage to another sheriff's county, one that he hasn't bought yet. Bobby finds Pam and chastises her for getting involved in Sue Ellen and JR's marriage. Yes, Bobby, notorious for keeping his nose out of other people's business.
Bobby, look what he did to Seth Stone. What chance do I have?
I'll stop him.
At Rancho Del Rey, Donna arrives home early from Virginia, and we get one of the hazards of shooting outdoors instead of against that janky backdrop they use sometimes for South Fork pool scenes. A stiff wind blows Susan Howard's skirt apart, and we nearly get a view of her Virginia. You can see her quickly cover for it and go on with the scene because she's a pro, but it is odd that that was the take that they used.
We did 20 takes, and that was the best one.
Turns out Donna came home early because Ray is spending their money to patch up his real estate boondoggle. Donna tells him he's moving too fast, which hurts his pride. It's telling and sad that 3 of the 4 boys chase the looming legacy of their father: JR in the oil business, Bobby as a father and husband, and Ray in real estate, and it wound up correcting them all in various ways. Yes, even Bobby. You know what? Especially Bobby. Ray as much as says that being successful in real estate is important to his self-worth and sense of purpose, and Donna basically comes back with, well, it's nice that you have yourself a little hobby while I'm at work. Yeah, get used to that dynamic this season. Elsewhere, Cliff tells his mom that the Ewings and Barneses will never get along, and the Barneses will always lose because JR owns everything. Black Pill Cliff Barnes is insufferably entertaining. At the apartment, Lucy returns to tell Mitch that she can't be married to him if he's going to take a self-righteous vow of lower middle classdom, and he says he can't tolerate being the bread loser in the couple. At San Angelo, Clayton greets JR and the police and politely tells them that JR's ship might fly in Von Erich country, but this is Joe Blanchard territory. Dusty and JR meet face to face again, which begs the question, how many people know that Dusty Farlow is alive? His death was notable enough to get the "we interrupt this program" treatment, but then Sue Ellen was shocked to find out that he was alive. And it seemed like he was keeping his lack of permanent herbaceous residence a secret from the world. And to JR, he's just that cowboy. Anyway, we get a standoff as the Farlows refuse to give John Ross back, and Sue Ellen tells JR she's suing him for divorce and custody of their child. Things go badly for JR because the police in San Angelo are friendly with the Farlows and not with the Ewings. McSween did warn him. JR does get in one good catty line.
Your boyfriend can come to your rescue in one mighty hobble.
Nice to see he hasn't lost it. Never one to let a good crisis go to waste, JR breaks the news to Sue Ellen that her sister is dead. Sue Ellen thinks he's lying, which he's not, or trying to manipulate her, which he is. She kicks him off the ranch and refuses to be swayed. At the other ranch, Bobby makes a plan to talk things over with Cliff and then consoles Pamela, who has lost a 3rd child now that John Ross is off the property. I think we'll find this one may have cracked her. Dejected, Mitch goes to see Afton, and both of these actors are so pretty and have so few scenes together that you almost root for them to get together until you remember that Mitch is Afton's brother. And let's not give the writers any ideas.
You know, for a guy who's about to graduate from medical school in a couple of weeks, you sure have a long face.
Afton, it's called dolichofaciality, and it's a serious condition. Mitch tries to drown his sorrows with whiskey, but Afton won't let him sulk. Afton, being the realist of the family, tells him to get off his high horse and get Lucy back. She also gives him a piece of advice I never noticed before, and it basically sets up Mitch's arc and a whole new set of problems for Mitch and Lucy. If Mitch can't tolerate Lucy being the rich one of the two of them, he better put his brain to use making some money. And interestingly, that's exactly what he does, but with even greater consequences. JR tears into Pamela for helping Sue Ellen take John Ross, and Bobby arrives home just in time for a good old-fashioned Ewing brawl. Ray manages to break it up before things get too violent, and JR promises retribution for everybody. To wit, he hires Howard Barker, a pit bull of a lawyer, to replace Lincoln Hargrave, the Ewing divorce lawyer from season 4. Barker tells him he needs to get John Ross back under his roof if he's going to prove that Sue Ellen is an unfit mother. Incidentally, Barker is played by character actor Herbert Rudley, who guested on basically every major 1950s and 1960s show. But his longest-running role was on the Juliet Prowse sitcom Mona McCluskey, in which he played the general. The premise of that sitcom, by the way, was that the titular Mona McCluskey was a big-time Hollywood actress who made the modern-day equivalent of about $2.5 million per year. But her Air Force sergeant husband insisted that they live off his meager salary. Interesting. By the way, the actor who played Mona's husband, Denny Miller, not to be confused with Dennis Miller, babe, would go on to appear in season 7 of Dallas, so I guess everyone on the Dallas production were big Mona McCluskey fans. At the store, Pam gets called out for zoning out. Well, at least she came in this time.
I didn't feel like working, so I just drove around all day.
JR is also reminded that he fired Luella in season 4, so now he'll have to find a new secretary. And you'd think that wouldn't be such a big deal, but it winds up giving us another great Dallas regular. Bobby and Cliff finally meet at the courthouse, and what looks like a courthouse backdrop in some shots. I guess it was too windy that day, and they didn't want to risk blowing open King Kercheval's pants and exposing his scrotum. Cliff, again, accuses Bobby of leaking documents to JR. Bobby thinks there's some other leak, but it doesn't matter because that was Cliff's best shot at JR and he blew it. Bobby is of course right on both counts. It was Cliff's own gullibility and hubris that allowed Afton Cooper to screw him over and give the documents to JR. Bobby also tells Cliff he's dead in Texas politics. Yeah, but how long do deaths really last on this show? At the Southern Cross Ranch, formerly dead Dusty Farlow laments not being able to fully be there for Sue Ellen. You know, groinily speaking. She tells him she's living the dream. Her white knight came to rescue her and saved her from the castle, and now she gets her happily ever after. He hopes she has just not traded one dungeon for another, though. On another windy day, Bobby hears Lucy's problems with Mitch, though nothing much is said besides Lucy wants Mitch back. And finally, over at Ewing Oil, JR promises his lawyer he'll be a good boy until the custody hearing is over. But Sheriff Washburn bursts in and tells them that the assistant DA confessed to helping cover up Kristen's admission of shooting JR a year ago. That gives JR plenty of motive to want her dead. And we're out. The first half of Season 5 will be a recalibration of the characters in the absence of Jim Davis, who died at the end of Season 4's production. In fact, the writers put off the fate of Jock Ewing for an astounding 13 episodes. Knowing that, we get the usual problems of a Dallas season opener. The primary of which is that once you have the answer to your cliffhanger mystery, it lets the air out of the narrative balloon. The stakes for Kristen's death only seem to involve JR, which makes her death seem like a cheap stunt. Sue Ellen is shocked to hear about it, but then she goes right back to making moon eyes at Dusty Farlow. That being said, the writers are doing a much better job of setting up the storylines in this season than they did in the Season 4 opener. Although in fairness, there were some extenuating circumstances involving a strike and Larry Hagman's holdout. Bobby is sliding nicely into the role of family patriarch, with both Lucy and Donna turning to him for marriage advice. But JR is continuing that more cold, calculating, controlling tradition of Jock Ewing. So let's see, we got JR on the hook for Kristen's murder, JR trying to get John Ross back from Sue Ellen trying to get away from JR and forge a relationship with Dusty Farlow, Pamela sleepwalking through life in a depression stupor, Bobby trying to Bobby her way out of it, Ray trying to prove he's something more than just a ranch hand, Donna trying to convince Ray that he should settle down and not wrap up his self-worth in one of his daddy's flights of fancy, Cliff trying to bond with his mother while also taking down the Ewings, Lucy wanting to make it work with Mitch, and vice versa without money becoming a problem, and Afton adopting the Guinan role until they can figure out something to do with her. All these things are big issues for the characters for most of the rest of the season, and when they solve these problems, they lead to even more entertaining results. But for now, let's just figure out how JR gets out of this one.